Hello creatives and welcome back to my channel. Today we are in Illustrator on the iPad and we're going to be diving deep into the pen tool once again. I did do a pen tool basics video right here, so if you have just started using the pen tool and you don't know much about it and it's one of those tools that are just a real struggle for you, go ahead and watch this one first. I do go through all the basics on how to use it. For this video, we're going to dive deep into how to illustrate with the pen tool, especially when it comes to lighting and shading. So I'm going to show you some tips and tricks on what to do with that. First things first, I do have a photo here. This is not my photo, however. This comes from this lovely creator. I really do enjoy her content, so go ahead and check her out. It has all this lighting and shading in it. So this is the original photo. You guys are more than welcome to use your own photos. Just make sure it's a photo of an inanimate object and it has lots of lighting and shading in it. In order to import a photo into Illustrator, in case you're not aware, there is a photo icon right over here. You just tap it and then choose photos and it will go to your photo library and you can pick whatever photo you choose. It'll go right onto layer 1. The layers panel is over here on the right. It'll go right onto layer 1. In the properties panel, which is the icon right below it, I'm going to move the opacity slider down to 70%. Just so the photo is not super distracting when you're illustrating. I'm going to go back to my layers panel and I'm going to lock that layer in place. That's layer 1, so if you want to create a new layer, which is what we're going to be illustrating on, you just press this or tap this plus sign right here and it creates a new layer in the layers panel. Let's get started. So let's go ahead and zoom in. I'm just going to zoom in on this one here. With the pen tool, it does take some practice. So the pen tool is the third one over here on the left. Typically, when you're starting with the pen tool, I like to start with shapes. That's why this coffee photo is so perfect, because it already has shapes in the photo. Let's take the pen tool and start with, let's start with the saucer. You can either use 2 points or 4 points. For the sake of this photo, I'm going to use 4 points. With circles, I like to use the tap and drag. Let's just tap and drag. So you have 1 anchor point and 2 handle points. And that's going to give you the ability to change up the shape and the angle of the shape as needed. Let's go this way, following the line here. I'm going to place a point here, tap and drag. You see how the handle moves like this? Try to match the angle of this line here with the angle of the saucer that's right there. And then I'm going to tap and drag over here. Whoops! I tapped by accident twice instead of just once. So double finger tap the screen to undo. The great thing about the iPad is that it does not break your shape apart. So you don't have to go back in, reselect the previous point, and then restart your whole pathway again. You can just pick up right where you left off, which is great. The final point I'm going to put down here, tap and drag. Match the angle of this line to the angle of the saucer. It's going to be a bit difficult because I didn't pull that handle, but don't worry, we're going to go back and do that. Now to close the shape, we're going to tap and drag on that original endpoint that we did. It's going to go very, very quickly. So if you got it, it's going to turn blue and it'll let you know that you got it. Now that we have this basic shape, let's go into our point selection tool, which is the second tool over here, and we're going to fix these handles. It's just a tap and drag throughout the whole process. So even if you mess up, it's okay. You can fix it. Let's go through. Now typically when I'm illustrating, I don't like to have a fill color activated. So I will just switch that over to stroke. If you tap on the stroke, you can change the color of it if you wish. And then in the properties panel over here, you can change the stroke width, which if you scroll down, it's right here. So I'm going to just do 2, just so we can see it. Now that we have this set on stroke, you can actually see where I have missed, let me zoom in for you, where I've missed the line. So just line this up a little bit better. Okay, so that's better. We have our shape. So this is the first shape we have created with the pen tool. Let's go ahead and mess with the lighting and the shading. I'm going to pull some colors here just because we have not done that yet. Okay, so now that we're going to do the shadow, we're on a new layer. Yes, I'm gonna add another layer because when you're doing differences of shading and lighting, you wanna put them on different layers so that way you can turn them on, turn them off, make sure that everything is organized, kind of like stacks of paper, so that way you can keep track of where you're going. Add a new layer by tapping that plus sign. So now we're on that layer. Activate your pen tool. For a lot of illustrators who are just starting out, you're probably wondering, or you may have this question like, how do you know how to follow the shape? Well, I can give you a quick answer, and that's going to be to place a shape. Just for funsies, let's draw out an oval here. Place a shape, modify that shape, and put it into place. So everything is basically shapes. If you're struggling to figure out, oh my goodness, where do I place my points? How do I know where to place a point? Follow the shape, meaning place the shape down. For instance, for the saucer, it was a circle, so that one's really easy. For something like this shape is a half moon shape. Even though it's a shadow, the generalized shape of it is a half moon shape. So keeping that in mind, when you're illustrating, look at everything as if it's already a shape. So that makes things a lot easier to see. Like for instance, here on the coffee, the shadow of the coffee, it's very plain that this is a half moon shape. So when you're illustrating, I know I'm jumping ahead here. Let's go ahead and take that shadow color of the coffee, activate the pen tool. I'm gonna switch the fill color to the stroke so that way it doesn't get in our way when we're illustrating. You just press these two arrows over here. So when you're creating this shape, you're gonna create it on high points and low points. I'm gonna start with a low point over here, because when you're looking at the shape, it's technically like a low point, like hills and valleys. So anything that goes like concave is a valley, anything that goes convex is a hill. So you always want to place your points at the valleys and at the hills. I placed my first point there, tap and drag, coming up to a turn. So when you come up to a turn, it's a lot easier to have 2 points to create the curve than it is to have a point at the top of the curve and try to like match it perfectly on both sides. I'll showcase that here. So you have 1 point on one side and then another point on the other side to create that nice fluid curve here. And then I'm going to do one on the top of the hill, which is right over here, and making sure that this line pairs up with the line of the shadow. And then we're going to come up to a really sharp curve, so we're going to do 2 points. One, pull until this line matches up with the curve there behind it, and then one here to marry the other point on the other side of the curve. And then to close the shape, tap and drag until you get a smooth curve here. And now you can go back and modify the points with your point selection tool. And now to see that, I'm just going to switch my stroke to my fill, and you see how it made the beautiful shape. Now this does take some practice. You're just looking at shapes, tapping and dragging to follow the line of the shape. So that's going to be a shadow. I'm going to create a new layer. It's always a good habit to get into to name your layers. Just double tap on the layer. There we go. So we're going to do, this is going to be the base. Coffee. Name your layers very specifically, otherwise you'll get lost. There we go. And that base coffee color is going to be this color. Activate your pen tool, and just like before with the saucer, you're going to do 4 points. I mean, I typically would do 2, but for the sake of this video, let's just do 4 and make it easier on ourselves. You can start wherever, whatever side you want. Whatever curve side you want. There's no sides, and you know what I'm saying, guys. Okay, tap and drag. And then if you accidentally tap, it's okay. I'll show you how to fix it. Tap and drag, tap and drag, tap and drag the original point to close the shape. Now, I goofed on purpose and accidentally did, whoops, I goofed again. That was not on purpose. I accidentally made a endpoint with no handles. So choose your point selection tool right here. Tap on the endpoint that you accidentally goofed on, and then there is a quick selection toolbar that pops up here. I did go over this slightly in the pen tool basics video. Since this point is an endpoint with no handles, which is grayed out right here, The only options left are to cut it or to turn it into an endpoint with handles. And that's what we want. So you just tap that. And look, there's handles. Look at that. So easy. And now you can just pull the handles into place and make it into your beautiful cup of coffee. Double tap to deselect, and look at that. You have a very, very plain cup of coffee. There's not much detail here yet. Now there are other techniques and more details that you can put on here to make it more believable as a cup of coffee, but this is very, very simple stuff right now. Let's go back to that saucer because we kind of just left it. Swap the stroke to the fill and choose that base color, a base color for the saucer. Now that it is on a fill color, you can zoom in to any area and see where we have missed. So you choose that point selection tool there, just pull a handle. It's all about pulling handles. You just pull a handle here, pull a handle there, switch the fill back to the stroke. Let's go and do that cup. Now this is going to be a different shape. It's basically like a half oval. So we're going to be on the coffee cup layer. Now to see the shape, if you're having difficulty seeing the shapes, you just place the shape down. So I'm on the sphere shape here. You just draw it out to match the cup. This is going to be the easiest way to see the shapes. Double tap to deselect. So now you can see that the cup is an oval shape that has another oval shape within it. Okay, let me make this a darker color so you can see it. Okay, so with coffee cups, you can see that it is an oval within an oval. Basically, sitting down these shapes just helps you as a guide if you're having difficulty seeing what the real shapes are while you're illustrating on something like this. So we're just gonna follow these lines here. Activate your pen tool, make sure you're on the coffee cup layer. And then I'm going to do just this shape within here. It's kind of like a smile. Start here, tap and drag to one side. Now before with the coffee, when we came to this point, it was more of a curve turn. With this one, it's more abrupt. So I'm going to show you how to break a handle when it comes to utilizing the pen tool when it comes to corners. I did mention this in my pen tool basics video, so let's put it into practice here. You're just gonna go to the top of that turn, so the apex if you will, and you're going to tap and drag. So now you have endpoint with two handles here, but then you have to turn the corner. There is a selector point over here. Hold that down, and you see how it gets bigger? And then you tap the handle, tap and drag it down to break it. Now I'm gonna tap it down at an angle but you still have this curve that's going on. So I'm gonna tap and drag at an angle and then release that selector point. Let's go down here, tap and drag. Just make the line white so it's easier to see. So you created this point here. Now if we zoom in, yeah, it's not exactly in place, but that's okay. We can always choose the point selection tool and we can move it later. Don't worry if you don't get it 100% correct. We're just getting the shape. Now that you have half of it done, you can do the same thing on the other side. So let's go over here, tap at the apex, tap and drag upward, hold down this selector, tap and drag the handle that you want to break, and break it down into an angle here. Take your finger off the selector over here, and then to close the shape, just tap and drag on that original endpoint. Now we didn't get exactly the result we wanted, so let's go and press that point selection tool. The point selection tool and the pen tool are kind of like buddies, you know? They kind of just go together, like peanut butter and jelly. So when you use one, you're always going to use the other. Let's just pull these handles and points into perfect position here. So now we have our shape. Now let's choose that shape that we just made, switch the stroke with the fill, put it back to that base color. Double tap to deselect and you have your coffee cup. I'm going to turn these shapes off that we created before by just pressing the eye icon and it turns them off. So now we have the makings of a good coffee cup and a saucer. We haven't done really any lighting, so let's go ahead into the saucer, create a new layer, double tap that layer and do saucer lighting. Most of the lighting on the saucer is within the shadow right here, and we're going to create that first. This is basically a half moon shape again. let's start on a hill. And you can always start from a corner as well. I just find it easier to start on the hill. And since these have sharp corners here and over here, I'm going to break the handle. So let's place a point, tap and drag, hold down this constraint, and break that handle. Same thing over here, tap and drag, hold down the constraint, break the handle. You always want to break the handle towards the direction that you are heading in. Close the shape, and now we can go back in and adjust all the angles of the handles and put them all into place. Let's just double tap to deselect, and now that looks a lot more believable. So let's go back into our saucer base, turn that on. It's really taking shape here with the light and the shadow. All of this is done with the pen tool. One thing I did not go over, when you use the point selection tool to select your shape, you can see all of the points that the shape makes up. So for instance, if you have the pen tool and you add a whole bunch of points and you realize, I really don't need all those points, let's simplify the shape. You can definitely simplify the shape by choosing that point selection tool, choosing an endpoint, pressing the X. Now the great thing that happens is that the path does not break. It is still the same continuous path, you just have less points because these are really superfluous. So you don't need them to keep the integrity of the shape. You always want to have the smallest amount of points possible to make up a shape when you're working with the pen tool. That is like one of the #1 things of the pen tool, because that makes the shape so much more seamless, so much more smooth, so much more believable. The quick selection toolbar really makes it very simple and easy, and you can do that anywhere. You can do that with this shape, with a coffee cup shape. Now, let's say you are using the pen tool, you have it activated, you're not really sure fully where to start on a shape, for instance with this handle here. So you start at a corner, tap and drag. You can place points wherever you need them to help you create the shape as you go along. And now, once you create the shape and you get everything into place, then you can go back and you can choose points and like, oh, I don't need this one, press the X. This one, don't need that point, okay, X that out. This one, don't need that point, X that out. And that's really all there is to it. So you can really start to see your illustrations take shape when utilizing the pen tool to create all of your custom shapes. From creating endpoints to creating endpoints with handles, breaking handles, utilizing the point selection tool along with the pen tool to create custom shapes, from removing excess points from when you're following a shape, and all of that in between. You can really start to create some really intricate illustrations. So I hope this video has been really helpful to you. For any of you who have started to dive into the pen tool and needed a little bit of guidance or starting to get really intricate illustrations like this, go ahead and subscribe if you haven't already, and give it a thumbs up if you did like this, if this was helpful for you. And I will see you all in my next video. See you soon, creatives.